Welcome back to my workshop. Today we're going to start working on a mantle which has been designed to match a desk which I'll also be making and videotaping. This mantle is for a new home. It consists, of course you've seen this drawing at the start of the video, this rendering, but it has two thick layers of 3-inch maple sandwiching a curved lamination which is veneered with curly maple and with a center recess in here. This is a very large piece. This is about 15 inches tall altogether and about a foot deep or so. It wraps around, and so what we're going to do today is we're going to start to make the bending forms for making these curved veneered portions of the mantle. This diagram here shows you a top view of the curve we're talking about. This is a 22 1/4 radius form we're going to make, on which we will then layer 2 layers of 1/4 inch plywood, which will give us about a 22 3/4 inch inside radius for the actual lamination. This is a drawing of the form that I'm going to be building. This is a top view. You can see the curvature. You can see the inside ribs that will hold the form together. And although I know it's hard to visualize, that's a view looking straight down on the form as though it's sitting on a table. And you can see that we have 6 curved ribs, each separated by about 1 inch and 13/16, with spacer blocks in between, all sitting on and connected to a base plate. And this will eventually go into the vacuum bag. So let's go through how to build this this form right now. The idea is for the laminations to be 10 inches wide, so I'm making the form about 12 inches wide. And in order to make the curve for the ribs, I'm going to make a template on which I'll put some clamps that will clamp down each of my ribs. I'll go ahead and make the curve on the template. Then I'll go ahead and bandsaw the curve onto the ribs, clamp that blank onto this template, and then using a bearing piloted straight bit in the router table or in the router, I will then clean up that curve so they're nice and smooth and all 6 ribs are identical. In order to make this 22 1/4 inch radius curve on the blank here, I'm going to make a homemade compass. I've taken a strip of 1/4 inch plywood. I've marked 2 marks 22 1/4 inches apart. I'll go ahead and drill 1/8 inch holes in here, both places. Lay this down on a point that I've already marked as the center, and then I'll just go ahead and draw my curve like that. So let's go ahead and do that now. I'll go ahead and put a little dimple in there. Stick my awl through the hole. You see that? Line it up approximately and then just skate around till I can feel that I'm in the dimple. And that way I can easily get into the hole. Then I'm going to take my pencil. I'm using a regular number 2 pencil for this to fit into that 1/8 inch hole. And I'm simply going to draw my curve. Okay, to cut the curve, I'm going to use my bandsaw with a 1/2 inch blade, 3 tooth per inch skip tooth. That'll be just fine. Got my dust collector set up. Turn on dust collector. Use an elaborate system with a router and a trammel and so forth to make a perfect curve, but I can really do this much faster using the line I've already made, using my edge sander, and I get this curve very, very accurate this way. Turn on dust collection. Now you can see that I've taken the form, or not the form, but the template for the curve, and I glued a fence onto this and put it on into the vise. See the fence there? And I put it on into the vise so that I could use it as a tracing platform to trace the rough curves onto all the 6 ribs. I made little marks here at each end, show me exactly where the ribs should go. I just go ahead and fit it on between the marks, take my pencil and trace the curve onto the rib blank, and then I can just use the bandsaw to bandsaw that out. I'll bandsaw a little bit proud, the idea being that eventually this will get clamped back on here, and this will be the guide for the bearing on the straight router bit. Okay, I've got my router guide template made up, got the clamps mounted. All I've got to do is take one of the blanks, lay it on here between my lines, clamp it in place. Go ahead and turn on my vacuum cleaner. I've got the vacuum hooked up to a regular dust collector on my router. There you go, a perfect curve on that particular rib. Now I've got all the parts for my bending form made. I've got the base, all the ribs. I've got 2 end pieces that I'll tack on here. And then I've got spacers that I'll be putting between all the ribs to keep them aligned and keep them from crushing in when they go into the vacuum bag and all the pressure is pushing in on them. So the first thing I'm going to do is go ahead and attach my end pieces. To do that, I'll simply use some glue and a brad nailer and attach them in place, and those will help guide the ribs to make sure they're all lined up longitudinally the correct way. Okay, that's all there is to it. Let that set up a little bit before we glue up the rest of the piece. Next, I'll attach one of the end ribs, and from that I'll line up all the rest of the end ribs. now the way I'm going to line up all the ribs, I'll use my little spacer blocks to separate each rib, and that will keep the separation the way it's supposed to be. I'll make sure I put these blocks in the correct direction. Just a little bit of glue on them. Okay, I'll just take a couple of clamps. What I'm trying to do is make sure these ribs are nice and tight against each other. Now, to keep the inside from collapsing, I've made a number of spacer blocks that go in between the ribs, and I've made marks as to where they belong. Okay, I laid down the top, tacked it in place with the brad nailer. Now I've put it inside the vacuum bag, which consists of a plastic bag, a platen with some grooves cut in it, give a little stability, a piece of masonite with some enamel on it. I'm going to go ahead and lay a piece of nylon mesh on top of the form here so that the air flows freely around the form. Go ahead and seal up the bag. Now I'm ready to pull a vacuum, turn on my vacuum pump, and as the air is being pulled out, I want to make sure that everything stays where it's supposed to be. The bending form for the mantle's curved laminates is out of the vacuum bag. A few things left to do, so I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to sand off the sharp edges so that when this goes in the vacuum bag again, it'll be a little bit easier on the plastic bag. Now, since I'll probably keep this form to use for other bends in the future, one of the things I want to make sure I do is record the radius of the bend. I'm just going to put R equals 22 3/4 inches. Okay, now when we use this to make laminations, the glue is going to squeeze out somewhat from the laminate, so we're going to put some clear packing tape on this to keep the glue from sticking to the form. When we actually do the bending of the laminate, we're going to want to know where the center of this form is. And I've already made some pencil marks, but I'm going to go ahead and make these marks much more distinctive with a little felt tip so that there's just no question of where the center line is. And that'll make life a lot easier for us. And the last thing I'm going to do is ventilate this so that the air can escape from the inside easily. The easiest thing to do is just to make a saw curve through here. But you can also drill holes. The idea here is to make it so that the vacuum pump evacuates the inside of this as well as the outside, and that way you don't have this trapped volume of air that slowly leaks back into the vacuum bag and causes your vacuum pump to continually run. And now you can see we've cut a saw curve that just barely makes it through this bottom piece and allows the inside to evacuate.